Hello, and welcome to the Altasciences webinar, Conformance, From Guides to Rules 2021, a SEND Progress Update, presented by Courtney Turnbaugh. We have just a few announcements before we begin. The slides will advance automatically throughout the presentation. At the bottom of your browser, you will find a help icon for technical assistance. If your screen freezes or the slides do not appear to be advancing as they should, please try exiting and restarting the session, as it may be an issue with your connectivity. As a reminder, you can submit a question at any time using the Q&A window on your screen, and we will address questions and answers at the end of the presentation. My name is Matthew Yukup. I'm the Senior Manager of Study Services at Altasciences, and I will be your moderator for this session. Before we start, a few words about Altasciences. Altasciences transforms the traditional outsourcing paradigm by simplifying and streamlining solutions, whether a single service or a synchronized approach to CRO and CDMO services, from lead candidate selection to clinical proof of concept and beyond. With facilities in the USA and Canada, Altasciences full-service solutions include preclinical safety testing, clinical pharmacology and proof of concept, bioanalysis, program management, medical writing, biostatistics, and data management, all customizable to specific sponsor requirements. Altasciences helps sponsors get better drugs to the people that need them faster. Our presenter today is Courtney Turnbaugh, Altasciences SEND Supervisor. Courtney joined Altasciences in 2012 and has over 10 years of preclinical industry experience. As Altasciences SEND Supervisor, Courtney leads a team of specialists and plays a key role in ensuring quality and efficient SEND operations. She also acts as a SEND consultant for internal and external stakeholders.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. Let's look at what we'll be covering today. First, we'll look at how SEND version 3.1 impacts your IND, BLA, and NDA submissions. Then we'll look at unpacking the biannually released FDA feedback from the Technical Conformance Guide. This is often referred to as the TCG. Next, we'll look at what the newly released CDISC Conformance Rules are and how they differ from the TCG mentioned previously. And lastly, we'll look at the expected use of the simplified ts.XPT with some use cases. Here are the important updates from SEND version 3.1. Studies with their protocols signed on or after March 15th of 2019 for NDA, ANDA, and certain BLAs, and studies with protocols signed on or after March 15th of 2020 for IND submissions are required to be submitted in SEND version 3.1. SEND version 3.1 expanded upon the scope of SEND version 3.0 by also including GLP and non-GLP studies that are submitted into the 4.2.1.3 ECTD section for safety pharmacology. Please note that respiratory and cardiovascular endpoints are the only ones currently modeled. It also is required for anything being submitted into the single and repeat dose and carcinogenicity sections based on the dates from the previous slide. Please see the specific ECTD sections listed on this slide. SEND version 3.1 added a whole new study type, but I'd like to note that the versions are very similar. This slide outlines some of the differences. There were two new domains added, the cardiovascular or CV domain. This domain contains the cardiovascular findings, such as blood pressure and heart rate, as well as the respiratory or RE domain. Example data that would be contained in the respiratory domain is the respiratory rate or tidal volume data. In version 3.0, both the cardiovascular and respiratory data was contained in the vital signs or VS domain. Now, the most common data contained in the vital signs domain is body temperature. Some minor differences were the removal of the visit day variable. This was replaced with the nominal day variable, which is viewed as better defining the data. Lastly, version 3.1 allows the addition of custom domains compared to version 3.0, which was limited to only the domains specified in the SENDIG. CDISC releases a short and helpful guide called the Confirmed Data Endpoints, or Codex, for SEND version 3.1. This document is a great resource. It outlines types of data along with specific sections in the SENDIG that contain examples and any pertinent comments. It contains additional information regarding which tests moved to which domains and what controlled terminology list to find them in. As seen in this screenshot, you can find the test name in the far left column and a comparison from which domain that was found in version 3.0 and version 3.1. Now I'd like to take a break and answer some frequently asked questions. First, is SEND required for GLP and non-GLP studies? Yes, all single dose toxicity, repeat dose toxicity, carcinogenicity, and safety pharmacology studies being used in a submission require SEND. When will reproductive toxicology studies be required? As of now, repro or DART studies are not required to be submitted. An implementation guide was released by CDISC on December 11th of 2017. However, CDER will notify of its support of the standard by placing it in the data study catalog prior to reproductive toxicology studies being adopted. Will the scope of SEND continue to increase? Yes, very much so. This is just the tip of the iceberg. SEND will continue to expand by increasing the number of implementation guides, including standards for dermo-ocular as well as gene toxicity studies. Additionally, with future updates to SEND, endpoints such as ADA data will likely be included. Where can I find information without having to read through the SENDIGs? This is a great question, as the SENDIGs can be long and confusing at times. The Fuse Wiki FAQ is a fantastic resource. Not only does it outline frequently asked questions in regards to SEND, it also allows for new questions to be asked regarding the SEND implementation forum. I highly suggest that everyone have this bookmarked, and you can find it in the reference section of this presentation. As most of you know, it's almost impossible to discuss SEND in a sentence without using an acronym. From IG to TCG, the supporting documents surrounding SEND are no different. I hope to explain, without too many acronyms, what these documents are and why they're important. Here is a very brief comparison of the Technical Conformance Guide and the SEND Conformance Rules. The Technical Conformance Guide is released biannually by the FDA. It's a non-binding guidance used to communicate FDA preferences on the way submissions are formatted. It also combines SEND with SDTM and ATOM recommendations. Next are the SEND Conformance Rules. This document is released by CDISC. It contains rules that are based on the SEND Implementation Guide, or SENDIG, also called the SENDIG. This was last updated in December of 2020 to include the SENDIG version 3.1 information. The TCG, or Technical Conformance Guide, is a vehicle for the FDA to communicate their recommendations to industry quickly. Since no standard is changed, there does not have to be a review period of this document. But this also means that they are non-binding and cannot cause a rejection. Please note that this document contains information on SEND, STDM, and ATOM, so it is not specific to non-clinical studies. The most recent Technical Conformance Guide indicated that it's not necessary to include the body weight gain, or BG, domain. It also updated to recommend that the comments domain, or the CO domain, should only include data relevant to study interpretation. Lastly, it contains a list of parameters to be included in the trial summary, or TS domain, which expanded on what is currently listed in the IG. For items that occur over multiple study days but are grouped for analysis, the nominal day for that observation should only include one study day. For example, a blood collection occurring at 2, 12, and 24 hours after the first dose should have the nominal day represented as 1 for all 3 time points. Laboratory test results, or the LB domain, containing any categorical numerical values should not have an LB stress N filled in, even if the value contains numbers, because these are categorical. Stress N should be left blank. This will cause a warning when using validators, and an example would be urine pH. Here, you'll see an example of an LB domain with urinalysis values. You can see that though these are numerical values, they are categorical, and therefore LB stress N has been left blank. The pharmacokinetics concentrations, or PC domain, has had a couple requested changes that are specific to the version 3.1 IG. When drug concentrations within the PC domain are below the limit of concentration, PC-ORES should remain in what is reported from the drug concentration analyzer and included in the final report. Then, PC stress C should indicate BLQ, which stands for below limit of quantification. If the BLQ values are used for analysis in the TK profile and assigned a number, then the assigned number should be populated in a sup-PC domain, also referred to as a supplemental domain. If the BLQ value is excluded completely from the TK profile, then no supplementary PC domain is required. Shown here is an example of a PC domain. All animals were below the limit of quantification. You can see that PC-ORES remains the same as the results from the analyzer, while PC stress C has been changed to BLQ. Additionally, the nominal day remains as 1 for the whole time series, as these data points are tied back to the day 1 dose. Continuing from the previous example, this is an example of the supplemental PC domain that would be included because the BLQ values from the previous slide were used during the TK analysis for the lower limit of quantification value during non-compartmental analysis. The SEND Conformance Rules, version 2.0, were finalized and published in December of 2020 by CDISC. These are a line-by-line detailing of every statement within the SENDIG. An example is the TESTCDs, which cannot be longer than 8 characters. This is not to be confused with the current validator or business rules. In the future, the possible goal of the rules are to be implemented into the FDA validator rules. Here's an example of the conformance rules released by CDISC, showing 2 rules related to the TESTCD as discussed in the previous slide. The first one, Rule 17, states that the TESTCD cannot be longer than 8 characters. The second relates to the TESTCD not being able to start with a number. In addition to the conformance rules and the TCG discussed previously, there are other rules that exist, including FDA business rules and validator rules. FDA business rules are simplified general requirements written for the FDA to internally use and process SEND data submissions. Validator rules are machine readable and are used by software to run against datasets. An example of this is the commonly used Pinnacle 21 validator rules. Now I would like to move on and discuss the use of simplified ts.XPT files. The ECTD system automatically checks submissions for trial summary, or ts.XPT files, when any of the following tags are used: preclinical study report, legacy clinical study report, or study report body. The ECTD modules that this applies to are seen in the slide. There are multiple instances where a report is submitted without requiring a SEND dataset. In those cases, one of the two types of simplified ts.xpt files should be used. Here's an example of a simplified ts.xpt where the study type is modeled in SEND, but the study does not have to be submitted in SEND format. The TS val is filled in with the protocol signature date, but note that the TS val NF or TS null flavor is left blank. Here's an example of a ts.xpt file with a null value. Note that the TS val is left blank, but the TS val NF is filled in with not applicable. This can be used in a variety of cases where study initiation is not applicable. Some examples might include non-clinical safety reports, carcinogenicity protocol amendments or carcinogenicity risk assessments, and exploratory or tolerability toxicology study summaries. Here is a flowchart with some example cases of using a simplified ts.xpt domain. When submitting into the following modules, the file tag of Legacy Clinical Study Report is used for a literature study. A simplified ts.xpt with a null value should be submitted. When a file tag of Preclinical Study Report is used for a repeat dose toxicity study that had a protocol signed before December 17th of 2017 is used, a simplified ts.xpt with date can be submitted since this study is modeled for SEND but was done before the requirement date. When a file tag of study report body is used for an expert pathologist report, a simplified ts.xpt with null value should also be submitted. We have reached the end of the new content for this webinar. I hope you all have learned a little bit more about SEND and are more comfortable in the environment. Specifically, I hope you walk away knowing that safety pharmacology studies are now included with the release of SEND version 3.1. Also, a summary of some of the SEND-specific content within the TCG and how that differs from the CDISC Conformance Rules. Lastly, how simplified ts.xpt should be used within the ECTD to avoid a technical rejection. Here are some references that have been mentioned throughout the webinar. Specifically, I recommend you check out the Fuse Wiki FAQ discussed.
Thank you very much for the updates, Courtney. Now we're on to the Q&A portion of our webinar. Question number 1, do I have to go back to older studies and have them redone in SEND 3.1?
No, you do not need to go back and update studies into version 3.1.
Next question, who determines what data should be included in the CO domain?
This should be a conversation that happens between the sponsor and the CRO that's creating your SEND dataset.
Is the Technical Conformance Guide basically a precursor to CDISC rules? Should everything just adhere to the guide as well as the rules?
This is a great question. And no, since the CDISC compliance rules are completely based on the SEND-IG, the TCGs are preferences of some changes to what's specified within the SEND-IGs.
And how can I produce the simplified ts.xpt domains?
You can produce them in-house, or you can ask your preferred CRO, including Altasciences, or use a SEND third-party conversion company to create these.
Other than submitting the studies, what should I be doing with them?
Data is very powerful, and I think that data warehousing is going to pay dividends in the future. Additionally, using SEND datasets for visualization can be a powerful tool to utilize the packages that you're already creating for a submission.
Last question. Will SEND be required to other countries' regulatory bodies other than the FDA?
So currently, both the Japanese Pharmaceutical and Medical Devices Agency, PMDA, and the European Medicines Agency, EMA, have not formally required SEND, but they are working towards possibly accepting CDISC standards across both their clinical and non-clinical submissions in the future.
Excellent. Thank you, Courtney, for the great presentation and overview of version 3.1. I would also like to thank you, our audience, for attending this webinar.
Thank you for having me, Matt, and thank you to the audience for the great questions. If you have any additional questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. I look forward to discussing SEND with you.